Education. And ask our treasurer for a roll call. Don't have my microphone on. Let me do that again. I'd like to call this regular business meeting of the Loveland Board of Education to order at 6 p.m. and welcome everyone and ask our treasurer for a roll call.
Reverend Eiler. Here. Dr. Lorenz.
Here.
Dr. Schwetchenow.
Here.
Mrs. Washburn.
Here.
All 4 board members are present this evening. We are in the Loveland Intermediate Middle School Media Center. We have several administrators present. We have a few guests present this evening. We have our treasurer and our superintendent here, and I would invite you all to join with us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America.
Thank you. First item on our agenda is to approve the agenda. It's a little hard to know if there were any additions or corrections. We've been having a little bit of trouble with board docs. But you have the agenda that was posted last week, and you have a paper copy in front of you if you need it. And if you can't get to board docs, let us know. So could we have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mrs. Washburn moved, Dr. Schwetchenow seconded. Any questions about the agenda? Not think, can we vote?
Mrs. Washburn.
Yes.
Dr. Schwetchenow.
Yes.
Reverend Eiler.
Yes.
Dr. Lorenz.
Yes, motion carried. We have 2 minutes items. We have, the first one is the June 27th regular session minutes. So I would move that we approve the June 27th, 2023 minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
Mrs. Washburn seconded. Any questions, corrections, additions? We vote on that.
Dr. Lorenz.
Yes,
Mrs. Washburn.
Yes.
Reverend Eiler. Dr. Schwetchenow.
Yes.
motion carried. The other minutes that we have to approve are from last night's special session. It is a short session of minutes. It does include our opening and closing. That meeting was not streamed. The beginning and the ending of the meeting were recorded. Most of the meeting was an executive session. Those minutes do include the list of 11 people who were interviewed for board member appointment. So is there a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Mrs. Washburn moved second.
Second.
Reverend Eilert seconded. Any questions, comments, additions? Vote on that.
Mrs. Washburn.
Yes.
Reverend Eiler.
Yes.
Dr. Lorenz.
Yes.
Dr. Schwetchenow.
Yes.
Motion carried. Thank you. Now I will officially welcome guests. I'll welcome our guests who are here. I already mentioned we have several administrators. Thanks for hanging in with us through the summer here and getting here in the rain. We do have 2 audience members, 2 folks who happen to be planning on running for Board of Education in November. So we're glad to have them here with us as well. We're glad to have anyone who's watching us streaming, anyone who's watching this as a recorded meeting later. And we do have time for hearing of the public this evening. Have anyone sign in, Mr. Giuffre?
No one signed in for hearing in public.
All right, thank you. Then we will move on to board president report. First of all, I would like to say that most of the board correspondence and work that's been done since the June 27th meeting has been involved with appointment of a board member to fill in the end of the term of Mr. Doherty. The board talked to 11 people who shared their experiences and qualifications. They told us about their passion for education and for serving Loveland students. They shared whether or not they plan to run in November for the 2 open board seats and how they would serve in this short-term assignment. It was a difficult decision for the board, but rather than choosing just one of the highly qualified candidates planning to run in the November election, the board opted to choose another one of the highly qualified candidates who indicated they will not be running in November. And so last evening, the board did appoint Mr. Brad Goldie, sorry, now I've said his name wrong already, Brad Goldie to fill Mr. Doherty's incomplete term. We had hoped to swear the new board member in this evening, but Mr. Goldie is out of town, so we plan to have his swearing in at the August 8th work session, the next board meeting that we have. The only other report that I have is that there is a policy on the agenda this evening My apologies for whatever glitches we're having in getting the policies up to date. We are still working with OSBA. We're doing a variety of things to try to get everything completed. I would love nothing more than to have that all completed before the end of this year, but we're working on it. We do, however, have one policy, relations with special interest groups, that involves distribution and posting of literature that we do need to go ahead and update and approve this evening. This has to do with things that will be sent home, in particular, things that would be sent home in electronic form for parents, for students, for family members, for community members, forms and flyers and things that go out. So that is the reason that this policy is being brought this evening, and that'll come later in the agenda. All right. Are there any other board members who have anything to report this evening? Looking at me. No. Eileen? No. All right. Then we'll move on to superintendent updates. Mr. Broadwater.
Good evening. Very quick update in that we have had a very busy summer. Obviously, summertime is when we do a lot of our upkeep of the facilities and so forth. But as far as hiring, we've got all of our administrators hired. We're down to, I believe, 2 teacher positions we have to fill and a couple aide positions. We are extremely excited with the new talent that we've been able to bring in, and it's been a very busy summer for all of our central office administrators, and I think we're in good shape and ready to go. That's my update.
Had some issues with that.
Yes, we do.
We had some issues earlier today, so. To ask that we have a resolution to the Director of Human Resources and resignations and work. Your motion.
So moved.
Dr. Swetchnow moved there, second. How about giving us a report?
Sure.
I turned it off so I wouldn't interrupt Mr. Broadwater's report, didn't turn it back on. We did have a resolution moved by Dr. Swetchnow and seconded by Mrs. Washburn to approve the Director of Human Resources items. They are available on board docs. Thank you, Adam, for.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for having me tonight. I would like to thank Mr. Broadwater for our last meeting. I wasn't able to attend, and we had quite a few HR items on that agenda. So thanks, Mike, for filling in when I wasn't able to be here. For the board members, there were a couple of things that are in yellow. If you noticed, those were a couple of late entries of things that weren't on there before the weekend. And then I would like to call your attention specifically to at the very bottom. If you remember a couple of years ago, when I first started, something that I brought to the board was looking at what our pay was like for our all of our substitutes. So that's been 2 years since we've upped that. In your notes section, in the administrator section, you'll see that we gathered some information about area districts. We got that report from Hamilton County ESC through Sub Solutions on what different districts are paying for different subs. And I listed some of that information for you there. And then I have a recommendation for paying our substitutes. There's many different items that are in there. The one that is the most common one, of course, is for a teacher sub and or for an aide sub. So I just wanted to make sure if you had any questions about that you had some data to look at on why the recommendation for the teacher sub and the aide sub pieces were going to be increased. We were sitting below the 50th percentile with those. There were like 33 different districts that the county works with. And then this is basically, putting us, everybody right now this is the time of year where they're upping it for the next year. So I don't know how much other places are going to increase theirs, but this puts us above the 50th percentile. But I don't think that's going to put us at the top, nor do I think that we need to be at the top, but it was a needed increase that I feel like that we needed to have. And I'd be glad to field any questions that you have about that.
You just want to report that the teacher increase is from 100 to 120, is
That's
that correct?
Yep.
And then the one other that I noted was maybe, that may have been the major one that I noted, was that.
Yeah,
change there.
if you look in the notes section, Dr. Lorenz, what you'll see is that those teacher subs throughout the county, they range. There was a district that was in the $90 a day range. And then the next group that we were a part of were the $100 a day kind of group.
Mhm.
And then there are many folks that were in the 110, 115, 120, or even more. And so our recommendation is to go from the $100 to $120 amount. And then you can also see what on the information, sometimes it says building subs, but also long-term subs. And you can see what the increase there was too. That was 110, and we've increased that to 135.
And so where the notes say building sub, that's the equivalent of our long-term sub.
You got
because
it.
they've actually become a sub in the building for a certain amount of time.
You got it.
Okay.
Garth, do you have any idea? I always hate asking questions that I haven't talked to you about beforehand. It's unfair to put you on the spot, but how many teacher sub days do we use in a year?
So I don't have that in front of me, but in the same data report that we get from the county, it actually has a multiple year look. So you can look at what it was this year. We are, for the past 2 years, we've actually decreased. But I honestly believe that because during the COVID time is when it was the highest. So we are getting better, and now we're back to kind of where we had been before prior to COVID with teacher subs. But I can certainly, I didn't include that in the notes section, but I can have the entire report, and I'd be glad to send it to you and let you know. I just don't have it in front of me right now.
That'd be great. And I'm sorry to ask you that. It wasn't something that I expected you to
Oh,
know
no,
off the
that's
top
all
of
right.
your head. And then just to reiterate, the 120 number, you're recommending in anticipation that several of the other districts that are currently in that $100 range will also be raising rates.
For sure. I'm anticipating all of the 110 or 115 or the $100 folks moving to somewhere around the 120. Then of course, all the 120s probably going to the 130 range and so on and so forth. And when you think of somebody working 7.5 hour day and you divide that per hour, we're not talking about a huge per hour cost for these folks, and they're working with our kids all day. So it's definitely something that's super important for us.
I don't think the notes tell us, how are we doing in the substitute bus driver range? How are we there?
So what we've done with substitute bus driver, same thing that we did 2 years ago, is we just tied it to the very bottom of the scale for our folks that are actually our own bus drivers. So we pay our substitutes that very base rate. And so that's what that recommendation for that is, what the base rate is now,
Okay.
and that would have been what you guys approved for the OPSI contract for the next 3 years.
So a little bit of a hike there for.
Correct. Yeah, but and we're just keeping it in line with what that base rate is.
Okay, thanks.
Mhm.
Anything else? All right. Mr. Giuffre, can we vote on that?
Dr. Try that again. Dr. Schwetzenow,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Reverend Eiler, Dr. Lorenz.
Yes, motion carried.
I do just have one other quick note for you guys to make sure that you know that, and I think that Mike's been updating the board as we've gone along. You know, our work that we've done with our OPSI group, and also you guys, of course, are aware that we have been in negotiations with our LEA as well. We are super hopeful that the ratification vote for the LEA is going to go in a positive way. And so you can look forward to our next board meeting, our next business board meeting, which I believe is the 20, what is it? I think it might be the 22nd of August. We're anticipating bringing that to the board as well. And of course, we'll be, giving you updates along the way. But a lot of credit to a lot of different people who are working on those items because they're very important to us.
Thank you. All right. We then move to our financial reports. And we have a couple of things under that, just 2 items under there. So the first one would be a motion to accept the financial reports for June 2023. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Dr. Swetchenow moved and I'll second that motion. Mr. Dufresne, do you have a report? Has there been a finance committee meeting since we last met? Is there anything to report in that way, or are these pretty standard June?
We did have a finance committee meeting, and that finance committee meeting was focused around issues that are ongoing and will be coming to the board in August. Certainly part of that is the biennium budget. And as the superintendent and I have done in the past, we'll cover the highlights of that, how it affects the district. We'll also do the year in review. And I can say that things have turned out quite favorably. Some timing issues, mostly in revenues, but our trends are quite a bit on track. What we looked at was what's changed since the levy, and really it's more of what's the same as the levy, because our revenues over under expenditures are still pretty much where they have been and where we expect them to be. But we're looking at a much more favorable outcome. When I say much more, I mean that our excuse me, that our current position where we landed is very much favorable to where we were projected to land. And part of that is just the formula that we have to estimate more expenditures than we have expenditures. We have to estimate less revenue than we have revenue. So keeping those factors in check, that certainly reflects on the ending balance. So we'll report out on that in August.
Okay, that'll be the year-end report. that
Yes.
We get in August.
And the preview of the forecast going forward in
All right.
24.
And just a little bit of I hope this is all right if I mention that it is possible that we will have a state representative here in August to give us a little bit of a rundown on the biennium budget. So that would be a coming attraction, if you will. All right. Any questions for Mr. Dufresne? All right, can we vote on that?
Dr. Schwetzner,
Yes.
Dr. Lorenz.
Yes.
Reverend Eiler. And Mrs. Washburn.
Yes. Motion carried. And then finally, under the treasurer's report, we have some more donations. I'll move that we accept the donations for, and this time, both of them are for cafeteria table donations. So I'll make that motion. Is there a second? Second. Mrs. Washburn seconded. I noticed we don't have Mr. Ames here this evening. Do we know if those donations have gotten us to a place where we're set to go ahead with tables, or?
Correct.
Okay,
Yep.
I was just curious if
Yep.
they've gotten there yet. All right, any questions about the donations? We're very appreciative of them nonetheless. We're getting, I'm sure, closer to
We are.
that number. All right, Mr. Dufresne.
Dr. Lorenz,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Reverend Eiler,
Yes.
Dr. Schwetzner.
Yes.
Motion carried. We have one board resolution. Am I moving too quickly through this meeting, everyone?
You're making me
We-
a little nervous over here.
We have one board resolution, which is that policy 9700, which I mentioned. I don't see a listing on there, but we are going to vote on it, right?
I thought I put it in there.
So I will move that we adopt policy 9700 as presented. Is there a second? Second. And so again, you have a copy of it. And there is a copy in board docs for anyone who's watching who can access board docs. It is simply some guidelines that about the distribution of posting of literature and flyers.
Since we have extra time, I thought about 32 amendments I'd like to propose.
Okay, sure, go ahead. You have to write them out in triplicate and then submit them, and then we'll consider them in the suggestion box.
Okay.
And
all right.
then, okay. Policy is so much fun. No
Looks
questions or
great. Thank
comments?
you.
Thank you. And thanks to Mr. Setters for working on this. And I do know that it was cleared through legal to make sure we had the right language. So I think we're good to go on that. Can we vote on that, Mr. Dufresne?
Dr. Lorenz,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Reverend Eiler,
Yes.
Dr. Schwetzner.
Yes.
Motion carried. Is there any other business that needs to come before this board? Is this going to be a record?
Well, no, it could be. It depends on how long you keep going.
So moved.
It was 23 minutes with
Is
that.
there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Seconds. Reverend Eilert moved,
Alright,
Mrs.
so.
Washburn seconded, Dr. Swetchner was trying. I saw him trying to get in there. All those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried. We are adjourned at 6:21.
And
And the Giants are beating the Reds.